It's Rog, and we're just days away from the start of one of football's most glorious months. The kick-off of Euro 2024, a men's tournament that will see teams from 24 countries, including France's latest golden generation, England's heavily favoured young Lions, what could possibly go wrong, and Scotland, who could make history by just getting out of the group stage. You can do that, can't you, lads? All of them and more will arrive in Germany, a 30-day stretch in shoes, when you'll learn more about Hungarian centre-backs and Albanian strikers. You know, the good stuff than you ever dreamed of. It's also a summer in which we'll find out just how much Alexi Lalas is too much Alexi Lalas, as Fox will broadcast the Euros by day and the Copa America by night. A lot of Lexi incoming, and to help us make sense of it all and to speed run through all 24 countries so that you are ready. I'll speed through them like Carmen Sandiego. After an espresso bender, I am delighted to be joined by the only gent I know whose knowledge is deeper than Portugal's bench and who can pronounce Kvaratskhelia on the very first try, unlike me. It's my mate, New York Times chief soccer correspondent, and quasi-Scotland fan. It's Mr. Rory Smith.
Not even quasi, full-on Scotland fan, followed by whoever's playing England.
It's the accent, it just gives it away. And also just the sardonic everything. But so much football about to go down, I do want to dive in. But first, Raw. I need to acknowledge just how much this Euros means to England right now. I read an incredible piece in The Guardian, I think it was on Friday, where they reported English football fans are predicted to spend $3.5 billion on items, including beer, pizzas, and new televisions. Those are the three basic food groups, Ro.
They are. Those are the things we eat in Britain: pizza, beer, and Hitachis. That's what we consume. I'm always slightly sceptical about how many people buy a new TV for a major football tournament, but some people must.
So funny. It's me. I think the 3.5 billion is about 3.5 billion on beer. They all share one large pizza, and I think they just throw the new TVs in to make that statistic seem mildly decent.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you're thinking about changing your telly, now's as good a time as any. That's maybe the thinking, but I'm slightly sceptical about that. And a lot of it depends on how England do, because whether the country contracts Euros fever will, I suspect, be related to first results and then performances. I'm
not a doctor. But I do diagnose cases of Euro fever. That's exactly where we'll start, Raw, as we dive in. We'll start not at the beginning, but we're going to go full on Sesame Street and start by celebrating the letter C, Group C, which stands for OVS, coming home. It's coming home, a statement that always ends with a question mark, and ultimately, in devastating disappointment, England's 3 Lions, 2 left-backs and 1 Harry Kane are among the favourites to win it all. The number crunchers at Opta simulated the outcome of the entire tournament 10,000 times, which sounds like a Proclaimers song about statistics, and they determined that England had an almost 20% chance of lifting £17 of sterling silver at the end of it as Euro 2024 winners. The supercomputer says we're champions, you'll never sing that. And despite the optimism of David Baddiel and Frank Skinner, whose song has sworn it's coming home now for the past 28 bloody years, a track that's now old enough to have children who've endured the generational trauma of England's loss in the 2020 edition of the Euros, which was held, you'll remember, in 2021 because of the pandemic. They fell to Italy on penalties in the final. Also the gut punch of the 2022 World Cup when one HK penalty miss. Well, there's a difference in a 2-1 loss to France in the quarter-finals. England's major tournament frustrations, they're well known. Men's side haven't delivered a major piece of silverware since the 1966 World Cup. And no other team has played as many games in the Euros without winning the whole bloody thing. Raw, can we get a quick bellwether, a finger in the air of the national mood? Where are we between hysteria and reality as we storm towards this one?
Probably closer to reality, partly because the final game before the Euros was a 1-0 defeat to Iceland, which was not really in the script. And I think it's reminded a lot of people that, particularly because it was Iceland, the deliverers of England's last great Euros humiliation in 2016, I think it's put a little bit of a pin in some of the enthusiasm. And partly, although this isn't great audio, because I think across Europe, the build-up to this tournament is relatively low-key. It sounds like even in Germany, as we're talking, we're sort of 3-4 days out from the opening game, and it feels like a tournament that people are going to need to see before they get excited about it. And there's lots and lots of different reasons for that. But in England, there is an awareness that this is a competitive team. If you look at their record in recent tournaments, final of Euro 2020, 2021, semi-finals in 2018, even the defeat to France in 2022, France made the final. They were, an Emiliano Martinez save away from retaining the World Cup. It wasn't a humiliation. It was just being beaten by a really good team. England have every right now to expect to make the latter stages of the tournament, and it's not as absurd as it used to be to think that England could go and win it. They have the squad, they have the experience, they have the quality. There's plenty of reasons to be excited, but I think generally everyone is waiting until this tournament starts, maybe, to come down with that full-on, full-blown, high-temperature Euros fever.
There is a huge pressure on the once waistcoated shoulders of manager Gareth Southgate. This is his fifth and almost certainly final tournament as England's national talisman. Raw, really at this point, we've seen so many different types of Southgate. He's a subject of ridicule when he joined for many. Became a national hero, almost a saint, definitely a diplomat. Felt like the last sensible man in Britain during World Cup 2018 and Euro 2020. And then almost just, we'd love to build him up and knock him down. An overly conservative scapegoat after World Cup 2022. But this squad he's chosen, shorn of his old tried and trusteds. Your Jordan Henderson's gone. Jack Grealish's thighs, both not selected. Harry Maguire, injured. We have 12 tournament virgins, which sounds like an amazing emo album forthcoming, but they include Chelsea's Cole Palmer, Manchester United's baby, Kobbie Mainoo, and a Palace duo, Eberici Eze, and midfield wonder. What a story he is, Adam Wharton. What kind of Southgate energy are we seeing going into this tournament?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been I think 3 stages of Southgate as England manager. The first main one was around, and there was Pete Southgate.
The Paleolithic age.
The waistcoat era of 2018, when he unexpectedly kind of won the nation's hearts as he guided England to the semi-finals of the World Cup. Marks and Spencer's, which for some reason is, those who don't know, Marks and Spencer's is it's just like a British chain store. It's not particularly special, but for some reason...
It's like the apogee of middle classness, would you say?
Kind of, yeah, but it's a little bit twee and a little bit kind of naff, and it always seems to be rebranding itself to try and capture young people, but it's where your auntie goes to buy her clothes, Marks and Spencer's. But for some reason we take Marks and Spencer's health as like a barometer of the national mood, and I really don't understand why we do that, but that's the role that Marks and Spencer's plays. It's
like Southerners, if you listen, it's how you use Waffle Houses during hurricanes.
I don't understand that reference, but okay. And, in the summer of 2018, Marks and Spencer sold out of waistcoats because Southgate had made them so fashionable.
Britain's future is to rise again!
And we kind of loved his kind of honour and his decency and his quiet sensibility, and everyone really liked it at a time when it felt like Britain, like a lot of the world, was going crazy. Southgate was just this resolutely quite normal, calm man, and everyone responded really well to it. And then by 2021, despite the fact that there's they're riding this sweet Caroline wave all the way to the final of the Euros, it did feel as though England had reverted to type with the manager. There was a lot of quibbling with his selections. There was a lot of kind of, well, he shouldn't be playing and he shouldn't be playing, and almost as though that tribal criticism of certain players, and particularly Jordan Henderson and Harry Maguire, had resurfaced. And it got covered over a little bit, but we had clearly passed Pete Southgate, and we were kind of suffering from Southgate ennui, maybe. And now we've almost reached Southgate fatigue, and he's become... It's not that people dislike him particularly. I don't think there's a big constituency that dislikes Gareth Southgate, but I think he's become so familiar that we just kind of overlook him, pick holes in him. In a way, we treat Gareth Southgate like we treat Marks and Spencers. And I'm now freewheeling, Rog. You're probably able to tell this.
No, I'm loving this.
So we only ever talk about Marks and Spencers when the profits are down or when their latest range has been a disaster or whatever. And Southgate, it feels as though we're so familiar with him that we've become slightly contemptuous of him. And I think that's really unfair for someone who's done a lot to turn England into a genuine force in world soccer.
He was more than that, though. He's a force for good in life and in the world. So we could never let that stand. We could never let that
that's not
be.
allowed.
Yes, why would you want something transcendent when you can grab it by the ankles and drag it down into the muck with the rest of us? But
this squad, Rog, is really un-Southgate. He's taken loads of risks, and it is a really genuinely left field squad. And there's two players who I think are suggestive of a little bit of desperation, or have maybe been fast tracked because Southgate's kind of in the mood to dance, and those are Mainu and Wharton. Mainu clearly wonderfully talented, huge career ahead of him, but he has only started kind of 24 games for Manchester United.
19 years old. That
feels a little bit like the kind of thing that England would do in the before times, before England had a sensible pathway to the national team. Taking Theo Walcott at 17 to the World Cup. There's just a little bit of that energy going on. And the other one is Wharton, who's been really impressive for Crystal Palace, but he has leapfrogged kind of 10 midfielders who have much more Premier League experience than him. And that feels, on the one hand, really exciting and very un-Southgate. I just wonder if it's a little bit kind of overkill. Like, you don't necessarily have to do that.
So interesting. So for those of you listeners who are not on the Adam Wharton Express, this was a gentleman who arrived at Palace, I think, last day of the transfer window, February 1st, was it? He was playing for Blackburn Rovers 5 months ago, but he has soared. And the two you've singled out, they really are. It's almost, I thought it was like Southgate's like, you didn't want transcendent Southgate, I'll give you a reckless, dangerous Southgate. But you're saying, no, you've decoded it wrong. This is the Southgate of desperation. And the honest truth is, you pick two footballers who are fascinating because the conservative Southgate may be gone, but doubts do remain of the extent to which Gareth will throw caution to the wind in his midfield selection. Question really is, who will play alongside the ripple muscle that is Declan Rice? And cases are being made for everyone you mentioned: Kobbie Mainoo, Adam Wharton. Some are even pushing for Trent Alexander to move into the midfield. These are all good names, but the midfield, ultimately, in international football, is about control, the heartbeat, chemistry and combination. It's got to be said, overall, Gareth has ripped it all up in the charge towards this tournament. Can you see a way that he can summon some lightning? Because against Iceland, that 1-0 defeat, it was dead battery all over the field.
It's really difficult to pick which way to go. It feels a bit like a choose-your-own-adventure thing. Or, I don't know whether you're a Terry Pratchett reader, Rog, but he had this... He's a sci-fi author, a really funny sci-fi author, who had this concept of the trousers of time, that basically every decision you make sends you down one leg or the other, and you never know what's in the other leg. Which is the way I kind of consider reality. So it could be that Southgate has enough talent in his squad and that he can throw these incredibly gifted players together and make something magical. Ultimately you have Bayern Munich's best player is England's striker. Real Madrid's best player-ish is England's midfielder. One of Arsenal's best players, England's other midfielder. Phil Foden, who kind of was the standout player for Man City this season. Bukayo Saka, Arsenal's other contender, along with Odegaard, to be their best player. Cole Palmer, who carried Chelsea. If you have that as your front six, you stand a chance. And it may not matter that they've never really played together and that Bellingham's going to have to play a slightly different role and that they're all going to have to kind of fold into each other in a way that does ultimately limit some of their abilities. It forces them to do things they're not entirely comfortable with, but they're all good enough to get away with it, and the talent level there is so high that England will sweep, certainly to the semi-finals, probably to the final, possibly to winning it. The other alternative, the other leg, the left leg,
the other trouser leg,
is the one that maybe feels a bit more traditional football logic, which is that it's not great to go into a tournament with a team that's never played together before. So if you suddenly throw in a side that has Mark Gay in defence with John Stones, possibly not a natural left-footed left-back. That's not great. Kieran Trippier maybe filling it out there. And then a midfield of Rice and Trent, or Rice and Bellingham with Palmer ahead of them, and Saka, Foden, Kane. It might be that they're incredibly talented, but in the latter stages of the tournament, the lack of chemistry, the lack of familiarity will stop England kind of gathering that momentum, being able to break down the better teams. Look, their group is Serbia, Slovenia and Denmark. They will get out of the group. It won't be a problem. But if you're running into the Dutch or the French or the Germans or the Spanish in the latter stages, you kind of want a team that has its rhythms set, that understands each other. And I think there is a risk that with this really exciting squad that he's chosen, Southgate is going to have to build the plane while he's flying it, and that's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, there were boos at Wembley, even from their children. It's so reassuring to me when I watch an England team lose, just that the next generation of English children are being taught to boo their heroes. After that shot when they'll lost to Iceland, when you look at this squad, the way you've articulated that one trouser leg of greatness, there's so many great Premier League players on this team, but there's also so much youth. And now, with these incredible changes in the squad composition, there's so much inexperience in this England team. And there's also been quite, I mean, some would say erratic, I could just say a lack of consistency in selection. Gareth's given so many players auditions. It's going to be fascinating to see how it gels, if it gels, as we leap into the unknown. But England's key weakness ultimately could be that backline, especially left back, where Southgate's got to choose from a banged up Luke Shaw, who's having his last appearance was 20 minutes for Manchester United against Luton, February 18th. He's tried Villa's Ezra Konsa in the friendly against Bosnia-Herzegovina, Newcastle's Kieran Trippier, Liverpool's versatile Joe Gomez, both in a loss to Iceland, but none of them play left back for their clubs. When you look at the most prominent English weakness, Raw, the aspect of their game that could prove Opta's supercomputer wrong, what do your eyes go to?
I think it has to be that. It's the fact that unless Luke Shaw is fit enough to play 90 minutes and from the start, then Southgate's going to have to basically pick a backline of 4 right-footed players. And I think that does, on some level, that impacts the way you can play. You know, England want to build out from the back. They want to play a more expansive style, a more controlled style. But if you're even Serbia, Slovenia or Denmark, none of whom are, you know, likely winners of the tournament, you'd look at that and think, well, look, we just need to make sure that the right-footed guy playing at left back and the right-footed guy playing on the left-hand side of the central defensive pairing get the ball as much as possible, essentially, because we can pin them in those areas. I think there's so much talent going forward. The natural way to stop England is to try and cut the supply line further back. And that's probably the way you do it. And I suppose the one X factor that England have, and it might be a question that Southgate has to face later in the tournament, Kyle Walker is England's best right back, as a pure right back. He's really important to that team. He's emerged as kind of one of the leaders. His recovery pace means that, you know, England effectively can't really be counter-attacked, which is a really useful skill to have. But do you have to take the risk of playing Trent there because he has that ability to play those game-breaking passes? I'm not sold on Trent as a pure midfielder. I think he needs to have that. I think that hybrid role he played at Liverpool suits him really well. But England might need to have as much attacking firepower on the right-hand side as possible to minimise the fact that their left-hand side might be a little bit easier to stop.
Let's look and cast a quick eye on the rest of the group here, starting with 21st ranked Denmark, who won this tournament almost like an international Leicester City fairy tale style in 1992. Beat Germany 2-0 in the final, a historic upset, honestly right up there with that time that Jethro Tull won the Best Metal Album Grammy over Metallica. Denmark reached the semi-finals in 2020, lost 2-1 to England in extra time. Their tournament defined by those terrifying moments, though, in that opening game when Christian Eriksen collapsed on the field in the first half, suffered a cardiac arrest with the world watching. Fortunately, blessedly, made a full recovery. He'll be back with the Danes, along with his Manchester United teammate Rasmus Højlund, who was Denmark's top scorer during qualifying. He scored 7 in 8 appearances, including a hat-trick against Finland. The third team in the group, 33 ranked Serbia, who've qualified for the Euros as an independent nation for the very first time. They competed as part of Yugoslavia. What a ferocious team they were in the past. The mighty Eagles will be led by 29-year-old Alexander Mitrovic, once of Fulham, now of course with mighty Al Hilal, just another player in that West London to Riyadh pipeline. He had a blistering first season in Saudi Arabia. I think he scored 28 goals, the most by any player, not named Cristiano Ronaldo. He'll be playing along with prolific Juventus striker Dusan Vlahovic. Rory, how important could that Serbia-Denmark game be, deciding which team other than England, please God, makes it out the group stage?
Yeah, it feels like that's the central fixture. Slovenia, I think, will be the outsiders in the group, although not an easy side to beat. I don't think anyone will get thumped in this group. I'm happy to be proven wrong. Denmark looked to me like Denmark were really disappointing in the World Cup, but they were excellent in the last Euros. It's basically the same squad with Rasmus Højlund on top, and the issue with the Denmark have always had is scoring goals. Højlund, who's got 7 in 14 internationally, he's been a little bit hit and miss at Manchester United. Obviously, he's young, he's raw, he's still developing. I wonder if Højlund could be the individual player who has the most transformative effect on his team, because Denmark have needed a prolific striker for a long time, and then Højlund, it feels like they might have a player who's just ready to kind of explode. So Denmark-Serbia looks like the key one for second, and I wonder if Denmark might have the edge in it.
Yeah, rounding out the group is Slovenia. If this was a music festival poster, Slovenia's name would be printed right at the bottom in the teensy 7-point font. Slovenia, your set would definitely be in the small tent mid-afternoon. 57th in the FIFA rankings. They're the third lowest ranked side in the tournament. They don't even have a really good nickname, and the mountain printed in the middle of their kits make them look like an exquisite new brand of camping stove. Regardless, Slovenia captained by 31-year-old Atletico Madrid goalkeeper Jan Oblak. So lovely to see him in international tournament play. He's won a La Liga title and Europa League. He's played a Champions League final, but will be making his debut in major international tournament play, which is magnificent. Arsenal supporters will also be watching hyper-athletic Benjamin Sesko, who's rumoured to be possibly moving from RB Salzburg to London. Let us be the first to say, welcome to Chelsea then, Benjamin. Raw, which of these teams is most likely to upset England to make Gareth Southgate wish you were already managing at Manchester United, or will that not be happening? Can you pick your two coming out of the group?
I don't think England will have an easy game. I think Slovenia will be tough. In Sesko, they have a striker who can score goals. They all have recipes to me for sort of disappointing England wins, essentially, where they're not especially convincing. But I think England will get 7 points and top the group. And I think Denmark will shade Serbia for second.
It's been a decade since England were knocked out of a tournament in the group stage. 2014 World Cup under the mighty Roy Hodgson, best Liverpool manager all time, when they took 1 point total from Costa Rica, Uruguay and Italy. They thought we were going to cakewalk that one, but I do think they're going to make it. And I believe, Raw, Serbia will too. But it's time now to go back to the beginning, to circle back to Group A. A, which stands for Achtung Baby. Group's main character is Germany, the nation which gave us the Carburettor, Kraftwerk and Hans Gruber, and is also the host for this year's tournament. It has been 40 years since the host nation won. That was France in 1984. And although Die Mannschaft are seen as strong contenders, there's still a lot of uncertainty around this side from how they'll set up. This is a team that once played Kai Havertz at left back to their shaky form in recent competitions. This is a truly shocking statistic. We think of Germany as a relentless, unstoppable force, but in reality, Germany haven't won a knockout game or kept a clean sheet at an international tournament since Euro 2016. In the last tournament, 2020, they lost 2-0 to England in the round of 16. Last World Cup, do I need to bring that one up? Because it was a disaster, crashed out in the group stage. I think they just won once against Costa Rica. Then manager Hansi Flick became the first German national team coach ever to be fired. He's been replaced by one-time Bayern manager and perpetual skateboard kickflip enthusiast Julian Nagelsmann, who at 36 is 2 years younger than presumed starting goalkeeper Manuel Neuer. As the host country, Germany didn't have to go through qualifiers, so there's that kind of tournament rust. Their recent friendlies have included wins over France and the Netherlands, but also losses to Turkey and Austria. Rory, Is there a team in this tournament playing with more pressure under the weight of heavier expectations than the home team, Germany?
This is a weird tournament for Germany. So the last 2 World Cups, as you mentioned, have been humiliating for Germany. To defend their title so poorly in 2018 and then to be knocked out in the group stage again in 2022 was deeply embarrassing. And I think a year ago, Germany was genuinely petrified of hosting the Euros. They were really embarrassed or really worried about the embarrassment that might be to come. Visions of being knocked out of their own tournament in the group stage, with all the knock-on effect that has for the tournament, because if the hosts do badly in a tournament, it does have a negative impact on the kind of general mood, because the country that is hosting the thing, the country where the carnival's meant to be happening, basically goes home. They're not interested if they're not in it anymore. There's a massive knock-on effect if the hosts struggle. And I think Germany a year ago, so even 6 months ago, was genuinely concerned that might happen. Nagelsmann's turned that round to an extent. The most recent set of friendlies against Ukraine and Greece have dampened it a little bit, I think, but the victories, particularly against the Dutch and the French in March, were really important in persuading the Germans, okay, look, this might be not a victorious summer. It might not be a summer in which you win the European Championships again, but there's no reason to think you can't be competitive, that you can't be excited. And that's crucial for Germany, as is the fact that Nagelsmann's managed to persuade Toni Kroos to come out of retirement, because that, I think, having him there for this glorious swan song, that gives Germany a figure it can rally behind.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Toni Kroos, ageless, but tempted back for his first international appearance since the last Euros. 34-year-old has tried to dampen all the passion and excitement about that by saying he, quote, is definitely not the saviour, but he does bring leadership and experience to this team. Germany's defence will be anchored by centre-backs Antonio Rudiger, fresh from Real Madrid's Champions League win, Jonathan Tah from Bayer Leverkusen. The attack features Bundesliga Player of the Season Florian Wirtz. What a poet of a footballer. Also of Xabi Alonso's unbeaten, never-losing team. And Bayern Munich's Jamal Musiala will play alongside Toni Kroos. Raw, you have leadership. You have experience. I think there's 3 players left from Germany's 2014 World Cup winning team in this squad. Is there a possibility, though, that the other trouser leg, could this be the wilt of the tournament?
It could be, and it's a tricky group, and those performances more than results against Ukraine and particularly Greece have given everyone a real pause for thought. The big concern with Germany is the goals, because there isn't a traditional number 9 other than Niklas Füllkrug, who isn't of the same class as Miroslav Klose or Jürgen Klinsmann or whoever. And without that kind of focal point, I think Germany tends to feel like it's on unfamiliar territory. They really like just a big guy up front who's going to score some goals, and you can rely on that. Without them, I think there is a sense of, okay, we're not quite sure how we're going to win games. Germany, I think, are likely to dominate games because they have a lot of technically gifted players, and particularly in the group stage, I think they'll dominate games, but they're not quite sure how they'll finish them off. Nagelsmann's solution, and it seems to be the sensible one, to be honest, is to emphasise the things that Germany are good at, and what Germany are good at is having creative midfielders. Toni Kroos obviously is a wonderful footballer to watch, but Musiala's a brilliant dribbler of the ball. He carries it really well, and Wirtz is endlessly creative and inventive. And I think if Nagelsmann can find a way to accentuate those traits, you'll have a flawed but quite exciting German team. And the last time Germany went into a major tournament that it was hosting with a flawed but quite exciting team, it was 2006. Jürgen Klinsmann was in charge. It made the semi-finals, and the whole country was swept away by the romance of it all. And I think that has to be Nagelsmann's ultimate ambition, is can you not necessarily win the tournament, but can you capture the hearts of the country?
That was Jürgen Klinsmann's greatest invention, creating a German team that even non-Germans had to look at, admire and savour, which as a kid I did not think was possible. Group A includes Switzerland, who are trying to become just the second country to win the most important double, the Eurovision and the Euros in the same year. Italy did it Euros 2020. Obviously they beat England on penalties, and they also won the Eurovision with a performance by Måneskin. a group that looks like essentially a pair of leather shorts. At the last Euros, they upset France in the round of 16 and took Spain to penalties in the quarterfinals. But going to this tournament, they finished by Romania in their qualifying group, draws with Belarus, Israel, Kosovo twice. The Red Crosses are captained by 31-year-old, at this point he's a cult hero, Granit Xhaka, who played his face off for Leverkusen this season, astutely noted earlier this year, quote, "I'm not getting any younger, but I'm not getting any older either." And undoubtedly, the power cube himself, 32-year-old Xherdan Shaqiri, will provide at least one improbable banger that defies physics. There's a reason why Switzerland's team page on uefa.com has got one reel for team goals and another one for Shaqiri goals. There's also Scotland. Beautiful Scotland, whose last win in the Euros came on June the 18th, 1996, which I do remember because that's also when Tracy Chapman's Give Me One Reason peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. I'm sure your mind went there too, listeners. Unfortunately, manager Steve Clarke's side is dealing with what seems like an epidemic of injuries. Most recently to QPR striker Lyndon Dykes, Liverpool's young winger Ben Doak. Their attack seems to be essentially Scott McTominay and good vibes. One online commenter described McTominay, not inaccurately, as Scotland's, quote, best midfielder, striker and centre-back. But that part human, part Scottish Terrier captain Andy Robertson said that he believes we can give any team a game. The goal's to be the team that creates history by being the first Scottish team to get out of the group. I really hope they do, purely to delight the Tartan army. What a delirious mass of humanity. Scotland fans, I like to think of them as the Everton supporters of international football. They're high on passion, low on actual on-field moments of wonder. There's a long-running joke that they're perpetually back home from tournaments before the postcards that they've sent from the host nations are actually delivered. But that's never diminished their enthusiasm. As the British consulate said, to an estimated 200,000 Scots who are expected to travel to Germany. And I love this. The Edinburgh airport has issued a warning about which kilt-related accessories have to be removed in the security line. Honestly, they're all that's good about football to make slightly less good. Final nation in the group, Hungary, team that your hipster friend who's got strong opinions about selvage denim and natural soaps is very, very into. Captained by 23-year-old Liverpool midfielder Dominic Szoboszlai, a gent who scores 2 Girouds on the football handsomer scale. And until Ireland scored in the 92nd minute in a pre-Euro friendly last week, his Hungary side hadn't lost since September 2022. Goalkeeper Dinesh Dibus said that Big Dom gave him the same feeling as when Lionel Messi was at his best, which makes me very much want to be friends with Dinesh. He's your great hype man. But as much as Hungary's historic football is rooted in the mighty Magyars of the 1950s, legends like Ferenc Puskás, they're present, very much connected to the country's far-right Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, whose government has poured billions into football because he sees a deep connection between sporting success and Hungarian nationalism. This is a real Orban quote. He said, "Football is a strange combination of being free and being a soldier. You have to be in the squad, but it's also creative because it's the dilemma of all modern societies to be organised and to be free on the pitch. I can find it. In politics, it's more difficult. The more I read that, the bloody darker it becomes. But it feels very Mussolini-era Italy. As a result, he's not condemned the displays from the Carpathian Brigade, Hungary's black shirt-wearing, frequently racist, anti-LGBTQ, far-right ultras who bring unwelcome dark vibes to this entire tournament. Rory, if we put aside the fascist, the autocratic thing about Hungarian football, could they be this year's dark horse, the Iceland, if you will, of this year's tournament, the historic upsetter, and charge on to the quarterfinals and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, it is not easy to put that aspect of the Hungarian national team to one side.
The fascisty thing.
The autocracy bit. Just because it's really visible. It will be really visible during the tournament that you'll see on social media, you will see the marches of the Carpathian Brigade and the other ultras to the stadiums. It's intimidating. It's a load of very muscly men in tight black t-shirts. Don't know what it is about the tightness of the t-shirts that seems to appeal to them so much. It feels a bit weird. Anyway, also in the stadiums you see them, they will pack the areas behind the goal where ultras, traditionally that's their territory, and they are all wearing black and they are very intimidating, so it's hard to ignore it completely. And I think for some of the players it's not really ideal. I know that there's at least one player in that Hungarian squad who doesn't necessarily share their politics, and I'm not quite sure how you square that circle, to be honest.
Is he further right than them, or is it?
He's not. He's the I don't want to alienate anybody. The correct way.
Non-fascisti. On
the pitch, they are one of the few teams, actually, including most of the traditional favourites, who are going into the tournament in decent form. The Hungarians have got a lot of momentum behind them. They've got one star player, one really high quality player in Szoboszlai. They've got quite a few good, solid, like Bundesliga, Liga, that level of pro players. They did well in 2020/2021. They will not necessarily surprise a few people, but I think they will be much more of a challenge than anybody's expecting. I think they'll get through, and once they're in the last 16, I'm not sure anyone will want to face them, to be honest.
Oh, it's time. Who have you got coming out of this one, Raw? I'm going to pray for non-autocracy. I'm going to go with neighbours, Germany and Switzerland, just because I'm a bit of an eternal optimist. But who you got?
I think Germany will nervously win the group, and I think Hungary will finish second. But we should not forget, Rog, it makes predicting things hard, but 4 of the teams who finish third will get through as well. So I'm going to say, as much as I love Switzerland, as much as Switzerland have a lot of experience, they've got a team that's been playing together for a long, long time. They have that familiarity. They're always difficult to beat. They're not very entertaining, but they're solid. I am going to say that Scotland will get through in third, and they will qualify for the last 16 for the first time in their history.
Oh my God, cue scenes and just hangovers of just national wonder, and I cannot wait to witness that. On to Group B, which stands as it always does for brutal. If there's a group of death in this tournament, it's this one. Spain, Italy, Croatia, currently sitting 8th, 9th and 10th in the FIFA rankings, just stacked up there. We'll start with Spain. Alaroja, who once dominated Europe. They won the Euros in 2008 and 2012 with Iniesta's extra time World Cup winning right foot of beauty, just jammed in there right between them. But then there were 11 long years of football famine on the men's side. Country didn't win another trophy until last year's Nations League win over Croatia, which feels a bit like a restaurant sliding from a Michelin star to a Yelp award. There's been darkness off the field too. Former Federation President Luis Rubiales resigned after his forcible kissing of Jenny Hermoso after Spain's women won the World Cup last year, which is still working its way through the Spanish legal system. And the federation's reputation was further tarnished by allegations of corruption. On top of that, all of it, plus Spain's underwhelming effort in the 2022 World Cup, which still lingers. They lost in the round of 16 to Morocco after Spain's first 3 penalty takers all failed to score. Then coach Luis Enrique, the Twitch streamer that we love the most, was replaced less than 40 hours later by Luis de la Fuente, former defender who's worked his way up the coaching ladder one age group at a time. He's led Spain's under-19s, under-21s, under-23s, and he remains in charge with the big boys. There are so many bright sparks though, mostly in the form of 16-year-old Lamine Yamal, the La Masia Rays Barcelona-based prodigy who became Spain's youngest ever goal scorer last September, and will be the youngest player in Euro history the moment he runs onto the field. On the other side of the pitch will be the quite thrilling Nico Williams, that bolt of energy who shone for Athletic Bilbao last season, holding it down the middle. Manchester City's Rodri, that rabbit's foot in human form, hasn't lost for club or country in over a year. Rory, you look at this Spanish side, it is a combination of youth and the opposite of that. I think they have the same numbers of players under 25 as they have over 30. What do Spain need to focus on to address in order to make it deep into the knockout rounds of this tournament?
Pinchos. There's a lot of Basques in this Spanish squad. A lot of Basques. So I'd say the crucial thing is giving them very small pieces of food on bread. That's my solution. It's a slightly weird Spanish squad. So Yamal is incredibly exciting, hugely talented, very young. The striking options are Alvaro Morata again and Joselu. And obviously Joselu kind of emerged as one of the folk heroes of the season with his 2 goals for Real against Bayern in the Champions League semi-final. But at the same time, he's very much still Joselu. So it feels a bit like that's maybe not a great thing. Ayoze Perez, Newcastle and Leicester fans will remember, has forced his way into the Spain team with a goal on his debut in one of the warm-up games. You look through the Spain squad and there's a startling absence of Real Madrid players and Barcelona players. There's not many from either. They are present. Pedri's there as well, after all his injury problems. They're drawn more from Athletic Bilbao, from Real Sociedad, from Alex Baina's there, from Villarreal. All very good players. It does make you think that perhaps this is not quite a Spain squad capable of winning a major tournament. I think you do need a degree of stardust in your squad, and I'm not sure Spain have it. But that said, I'm not sure anyone's got a player who's as good at what he does as Rodri, and that gives you a chance.
Well, there's a Rodri, there is a chance. By the way, I love your idea of just the greatest motivation for professional football as little bits of bread with little bits of food on. I do kind of get the feeling if you offered those to Jack Grealish throughout last season, then this performance, like, you give me a little bit of food, a little bit of toasty. I mean, he would have played.
What do you think Jack Grealish would make of a pincho? I think he'd be completely confused by the concept.
It's just like beans on toast. That's probably what he'd say as he looked at it. I think he'd be one of the most highly motivated men in football. Next in the group, Croatia. Team whose crest may as well be a red and white drawing of Luka Modric's face at this point. 38-year-old has played for his national team for the past 18 years. It's not a football career, it's a way of life. He's expected to be the centrepiece of this consistently overachieving side for the next month to come. Manager Zlatko Dalic said, quote, he's got to be out there in every game. It's what makes him even better. We always expect him to be our leader. Dalic has been in charge since 2017. He's had the luxury of working with players like Modric, Manchester City's Mateo Kovacic, and even Perisic since then, so they know his tactics innately, his setup, probably his go-to breakfast order by now. But is there a point where familiarity slides almost into a detrimental predictability?
The Croatia have done enough to not be written off. But if you look at the squad, you do think that this is all very familiar, and the key players are going to be the same key players as they were in 2018, and the problems will be the same as they were in 2021. But at the same time, they warrant respect, I think. It's easy to look at the squad and say, you know, Modric is 38, Kovacic is 30, Brozovic is playing in Saudi Arabia. None of this is great. But at the same time, behind that, there are little shoots of youth and intrigue and recovery. So Josto Gvardiol, Manchester City's left-back / striker, he's had an excellent season for City. Josip Šutalo, the Ajax defender, is very promising, I think, alongside him. They've got a couple of young midfielders, Luka Sucic coming through at Red Bull Salzburg. There are players there who maybe could do some of Modric's running for him. But that said, it still feels like if Croatia are going to succeed in the tournament, it will be with the same players as in 2022, as in 2021, as in 2018. And that, I think, feels like it might be a bridge too far for that generation.
On to Italy. You're defending Euro champions. In the tournament's history, Spain is the only ever nation to win twice in a row. And Gelazzurri, they've been through a lot of changes in the past 3 years. They failed to qualify for the 2022 World Cup, second straight that they've missed. It's unfathomable. They slid into this tournament on the back of a controversial 0-0 draw against Ukraine. How do you say squeaky bum time in Italian? Probably just with pinched finger purses waved angrily in the air. Last August, long-time manager Roberto Mancini abruptly resigned, deciding to take his talents to Saudi Arabia, became the Green Falcons' new national team manager. Italy's current coach is Luciano Spalletti, that innovative 65-year-old bald who led Roma to 2 Coppa Italia wins and then last season led Napoli to the romance of their first Serie A title since 1990. At Napoli, he said lots of great things like, "There are no tactical schemes anymore. The spaces are no longer between the lines, but among players." And he praised his players' chemistry for helping them find those spaces. He currently has 6 commandments up in Italy's changing room, which include things like constant pressing and fierce re-aggression. I just love that notion. I don't think I have any fierce re-aggression in my body. There's no believe sign for Luciano. It's just fierce, bloody re-aggression, lads. Raw, can a manager like this take a team in transition? I'm not saying they've just been thrown together, but they are kind of just international teams, much more fleeting in nature, and turn them into a clenched fist contender.
Well, I don't know if you remember former Everton stalwart Carlo Ancelotti.
Everton legend. What's happened to him now?
I'm not sure you don't hear much from him these days. But he said a few days ago, I think, that he looked through the Italian squad and apart from Gigi Donnarumma, the PSG keeper, didn't see any world-class players, which I've got to admit I think is a bit harsh. I think there are some good players in this Italian squad. They're maybe a little bit more low-key than your Francesco Totti's and your Alex Del Piero's, but overall I think there's plenty of talent there. Davide Frattesi's good midfielder. Nicolo Barella, if he's fit, will be potentially a decisive player for Italy. The big test is, can Spalletti, who has always been kind of a philosopher coach, he has a very defined way of how he thinks football should be played, can he get those messages through to his squad? Before this international break, he'd only ever been in charge for 2 games of Italy, and they were both in the States in March, and I don't know how much tactical work you can realistically do, to be honest, in that sort of break. The flip side of that is that Spalletti's always been very good at finding solutions to problems. So when he was at Roma, he invented the false nine role, which everyone thinks of as being Messi's thing and Guardiola's thing. Spalletti did it with Francesco Totti at Roma. He's got an amazing record at getting golden seasons out of strikers, and I think that probably isn't a bad trick to have up your sleeve going into a major tournament, because ultimately what you need to be successful if you're Italy is Gianluca Scamacca to score 5 goals. If Gianluca Scamacca or Giacomo Raspadori score 5 goals in Euro 2024, Italy will do well, ultimately.
It's fair. Scamacca is like to Italy what Marks and Spencer's and its budgetary health is to the future of Britain.
Exactly. So I think Spalletti's CV, Deschamps is a bit of a weird example at France, and obviously Nagelsmann in Germany is much younger. Spalletti's CV probably marked him out as the best coach in the Euros, and that's not a bad thing to have if you're Italy.
He's like a bald Greg Berhalter. Finally, we come to Albania, and they did top their qualifying group ahead of the Czech Republic and Poland, but they are the second lowest ranked team in the entire tournament, and I kind of think they got the same chance of surviving as that first kid who tries to sneak out of summer camp in a slasher film. Raw, this is a tough group to call, but crystal ball time, who emerges from this savage buzzsaw of a group?
So what I say about Albania is I think defensively they're going to be quite tough. They've got some good players in defence. They've got 2 good goalkeepers.
And they're going to play them both.
And they're going to play them both. They're going to both line up. No, and then they've got a defence that's basically a kind of top 5 Serie A defence. Kumbulla, who's at Sassuolo, Elsid Hisai, who's at Lazio, Jem City, the captain, plays for Atalanta, obviously Europa League winners. They're not minnows in the traditional sense, Albania. I think they will be tough. They've got 2 Premier League legends on the coaching staff. Silvinho, once of Arsenal. Pablo Zabaleta, his assistant. It's Brazil, it's Argentina. It's hands across the River Plate. It's beautiful. I don't think there'll be pushovers, but I don't think they'll get through. And my instinct is to say that it will be Spain and Italy in that order who make it.
I'm going with Spain and Croatia, baby. We are halfway through this epic task. Rory, that is enough for us today. We will pick up with Group D. For danger in the second episode. Whole tournament starts this Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Host Germany welcome mighty Scotland to Munich in a clash of lederhosen against those kilts. Raw, you mentioned this at the top. very, very quickly, what is your own excitement level going into this? I mean, you were fairly pessimistic up top, and in your latest writing, you said all of the emotions ordinarily associated with one of soccer's showpieces, hope, excitement, fear, wonder about how England will sabotage itself, have been overshadowed by something else, something closer to ennui, as a result of the out of sync calendar of the past 4 years. Has it really just been 3 since the last Euros? Barely 18 months since the World Cup ended in Leo Messi triumph. How are you feeling? Will your own anticipation build as this gets underway, or are you just all in right now? Bring it on. Kilts on, baby.
Well, I've always got a kilt on, obviously. I wouldn't ever broadcast without a kilt on, Rog, you know that. I think it's difficult because there is now so much soccer. I think if you're a player, a fan, a journalist, an observer, whatever your relationship to it, it does feel as though sometimes you get to the end of the season and you kind of want a break, to be perfectly honest. But that said, I can feel the stirrings, Rog, of thinking, do you know what? This will be quite good. This is quite interesting. The other problem with the Euros, it's one thing that's not mentioned in that piece, the structure doesn't make it easy because you play an awful lot of games to eliminate very few teams. Once there's something at stake, once there's some jeopardy, once you see a couple of players who are maybe starting to, have the summer of their lives, it's really hard not to get swept away. So although I do not have Euros fever now, I think I am vulnerable to it.
ABK, Raw, always be kilting. To more, to the Euros, courage.